so to speak. So I think I'll turn it over to the panel and hear what the experts have to say on it, and see where we're at. So I'll introduce John, a friend of mine, John Sandy's going to help out here and take over with monitoring, and I'm going to jump in as well moderating. So thanks, John.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. First of all, I'm going to warn you in advance. We're going to have a little fun here, death and taxes. And I want to thank Michelle. Is Michelle in the room? All right, thank you. This is the lady behind the event right here. So, Kevin, you did great. And I want to thank Kevin for the opportunity. But also, I want to ask you guys to play along in a few favors. How many of you guys know Andy Daniels? Pretty much? Okay. Can y'all please start calling him Commander? Okay, that's my new nickname for Andy, and I really wanted to go viral. Okay, so all seriously, how many veterans do we have in the room? Okay, I would like to thank you for your service, but in particular, I would like for Josh to stand up. Josh Wills just finished 8 years serving in Iraq and El Salvador, and I'm grateful for it. I'm going to ask my panel, starting here, to introduce themselves, and then we'll share a couple stories and some context, and then we'll get right to the questions.
Yeah, thank you. Can everybody hear me? My name's Dave Myers. Live just north of Lafayette, north of Indianapolis, Indiana, just between Indy and Lafayette. Co-founder of a new company called Bird Dog LLC. And our goal is to help farmers who want to grow and who want to try to rent more land be able to do that in a way that's professional and allows you to be able to share your story and we protect that image and that reputation. And at the same time, be able to create a marketplace where landowners can also have the opportunity to pursue you as well. And we are excited about that opportunity.
My name is Eric O'Brien. I'm a co-founder and managing director of Ball Line Capital. So we're a firm that does two things. We invest in farmland across the United States, all project for row crop ag land. We're in 8 or 9 different areas throughout the U.S. So we purchase and manage that land. We're structured as a real estate investment trust. So we rent that land out to local farmers. So we really look to partner with local farmers. Our bias is toward smaller to mid-sized operators. Couple thousand acres to maybe 5,000 to 10,000 acres. And we work with those farmers to improve their operations. So the other thing that we do is invest in ag technology companies. So we actually invest directly in startups. That's my background. I was a Silicon Valley venture capitalist, which apparently is a dangerous thing to say around these parts. But so we actually are a little bit unique in that our headquarters is in Silicon Valley, but our team is predominantly from the areas where they grew up farming. So we've got folks from Iowa and Louisiana, Arkansas working for us. We've got guys from Canada and Brazil and Argentina and France and bringing kind of best practices from all over the world, combining that with technology and then applying that in the areas where we own land. And the objective is to buy farms and find ways to improve them, whether that be through capital improvements, drainage, irrigation, all sorts of things like that, and then actual operating improvements. So one of the big things that we do, and I think part of the reason I'm on this panel here, is if you look at the bulk of the deals that we've done, we manage about $325 million of capital right now, has been generational changes. So when a farmer is looking to retire and is looking to sell his land, but wants to see it remain in ag production, wants to see some of the younger guys in the community have a shot at farming it, we're the capital partner for that. We buy the land and we'll work with the younger farmers. We'll actually help finance them in the way we structure leases and budgets, things like that, to encourage them to be able to grow and actually be able to farm in an environment where you typically got to go out and get a couple $1 million.
And we're going to dig into some of those in detail.
I will shut up now.
Yeah. Well, I want to get the introductions done because I have some context I want to set. So some of these remarks about y'all's individual industry will have some context to it. So they gave you the mic,
Great. Glad to know. Eric knows why he's here. I'm not certain why I'm here. My name's Pat Flynn. I'm an attorney, so you can all start throwing things at this point. I met Kevin at a FCS Financial speaking engagement. He spoke before me. I got the afternoon session, so everyone was sleeping by the time I got up. But Kevin asked me to come speak today. I was a state court trial judge for the state of Missouri for 13 years. primarily a probate judge. I now do estate planning for agricultural businesses, farmers, little old ladies. I do, and the issues that particularly, those issues that are particular to agriculture, it's my degrees in agriculture economics from the University of Missouri Columbia, go Tigers.
All right.
And I'm just glad to be here with you guys.
Jim Farrell, Farmers National Farm Management Real Estate Company out of Omaha. We're an 87-year-old employee-owned landowner services company. We manage about 5,000 farms and ranches in 24 states and some in Canada. We sell 500, 600 properties a year, mostly farm and ranch land, and do appraisals, manage oil and gas assets, that sort of thing, anything that's connected to the land. So, glad to be here.
Paul Neefer, my day job is I'm a principal with Clifton Larson Allen, which is about the 8th largest CPA firm in the U.S. I think we're up to 110 offices or so. I guess my second job is in your material. I'm the farm CPA. I'm not from Ohio State, but I am the farm CPA. Started a blog about 7-8 years ago called farmcpatoday.com. Try to provide information on farm taxes, farm bill, succession planning, anything related to farming and the business of farming. So again, that's at farmcpatoday.com.
Yeah, my name is Steve Brewer. I'm with People's Company in Iowa. We're a real estate brokerage, appraisal company, farm management company, and then do a lot of work with the land investment space as well. We're in about 14 states, with about 70% of what we do would be primarily in the Midwest.
Plus, I think you got Donald Trump started as president, didn't you?
I don't always claim that, but yeah, we had Donald Trump speak at an event in Iowa a few years ago, January of 2015, when it appeared it was a joke, and now it's real. So.
It's still maybe a joke.
He's been running for president for 20 years, by the way. Kevin Barely with Keiko Icing, formerly Kennedy & Co., 85-year-old national accounting and consulting, ag, and food firm. I'm based out of Denver. Been with the firm for 20-some years, and I'm an attorney and an accountant also.
Awesome. Well, you might ask why am I chairing the panel. I have close to 30 years in the investment industry, in particular the last few years working with Andy to founded an independent trust company out of Nashville. So a lot of this work we're going to talk about the asset class first of land and farm, and then context, and then we'll talk about the particular questions that came into the newsletter. But a couple of things I want to remind you of. There's $1 trillion a year for the next 40 years changing hands. So it's the first ever in the history of the world of mass affluent wealth transfer. It's not just in the U.S., it's in basically every country in the world. About 70% of families ended failure by the third generation. We have the body of research that went on for years at Boston University. So it's a real problem. I authored a white paper called The Impending Wealth Transfer Train Wreck. And so we can talk about that later, and I can get you some information on it. But most of the families doing it in failure, 70% of the reason is between trust and communication of the family members. It's not tax, it's not legal, it's not investment. It's behavioral. There's also 20,000 families a year over $20 billion for the next 40 years changing hands. So this is a big topic. In particular, I want to also talk a little bit about a concept called VUCA. Andy went up to West Point Military Academy through some training on decision making and how the military is making decisions these days because, the whole idea of risk has become asymmetrical. It's everywhere all the time. It didn't used to be that way. The Reds fought the Blues and they attacked each other. So VUCA, you might write this down, it stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. Does that describe farming? That's the world we're living in. So also, in particular, if you look at the stock market, all-time high, bond market, interest rates, politics, real estate value, everything's in an extreme right now. Would you agree? I mean, not hardly ever in the course of history have we had these things line up where a stock and bond market hit an all-time high at the same time. So we're also in the throes of severe financial repression. This is a technical term and essentially describes when you have extremely low interest rates, which repress savers, pension plans, insurance companies. And it also is coupled with severe regulation. We went through this period of time from 1945 to about 1970. This is partly how they tried to get out of the debt from the war. So you have good, you have financial repression going on. We started with hope and change, and now we're making America great again. Okay? So that's the environment we're in, with the transfer of the wealth, and then with things becoming more asymmetrical all the time. So with that, let's take some of the questions and go to the panel.
Yeah, I think the first question we get everywhere we go is, what's going to happen with farmland prices? Where are we at? What do you guys see? Start with Jeff.
So let me give some context though. The price of land. Going up is good, right? But if you're trying to transfer that land multi-generational, a high value might not be what you're looking for. So I want to take that context to the panel and talk about land prices, not just to get the most to sell, okay, but also some strategies that you use to depress the price of land legally for transfer.
Yeah, I think first though we need to decide what are we doing here with the prices. I mean, give us the landscape where we're at. I think guys are out here asking me where are we seeing prices break? Are they breaking? What's the drag right now? What do we see here in the future? So go ahead, you guys.
Did you want me to start first?
Definitely.
Yeah. Steve and I stood and talked about this out in the hallway. And really, when you look at the amount of gross income deterioration that we've had at the farm level, and then you look at how much land prices have gone down, land prices really haven't deteriorated a lot. They have gone down. And we think in the states that we deal in our primary states, through the central Midwest, we've seen probably 15 to 20% drop from the tops in 2013 on top quality land. And if you get into what would be considered more of a medium or poor quality land, the deterioration has been more. There are some markets that we're in where it's maybe as much as 30% down, maybe 35% down on some of those poor quality acres. Good irrigated land right now. We just sold some in Nebraska for $10,000 an acre. We can still sell land in Iowa. Steve sells land in Iowa as well. At some really good prices. So even though we've seen deterioration, the prices are still pretty high by comparison to where they started in 2006. So where are we headed? And I don't know if I can give you a specific answer to that, but I've talked to a lot of folks over the last year, and my analogy is that the land market is pretty fragile right now. I would characterize it as a very fragile market. We've been on a kind of a slow roll downhill since the top of the markets were hit. And for all intents and purposes, we hit the tops of those markets in the first quarter of 2013 on land prices. We sold more land in the last quarter of 2012 than we did the entire previous year, as landowners are trying to get out of land investments ahead of capital gains changes. It was incredible. I think one day we had 8 auctions one day. I mean, we had auctions every day for several months of people trying to move property. And then it kind of quieted down after that end of the year, and then the market kind of peaked, and then it started to roll down a little bit from there. I think we have more downward pressure on land markets. There are still some headwinds coming. There's a certain amount of this market that, in my opinion, was driven by interest rate, the easing of interest rate or monetary policy, if you will, and the interest rates. It probably put in, I would estimate, as much as 20% in the land market for a variety of reasons. It held a lot of land off the market. So just within our shop, where we manage about 2 million acres of ground, and we manage for multi-generational families, to your point. We've got some clients we've managed the same property for the same families for 85 years. And so we become kind of a succession plan to eliminate some of that turmoil. But we saw about a 30 to 40% drop in the number of landowners that were selling property starting in about 2007 and 2008 over what we traditionally would see. So if we looked at our portfolio and we said, okay, maybe 2.5% of the people are going to sell their land in a given year, that dropped, and it hasn't come back up yet. A lot of that has to do with the perception that there aren't safe investments, so landowners are holding on to the land for a longer period of time. heirs are inheriting it and not selling it right away. And that's not in every case, but proportionately fewer of them. That's holding land off the market a little bit. So really, I think Steve, I don't know if Steve will agree with me on that, but I think we've got an equilibrium in the market right now, which has been really steady for our market. We have about as many buyers as we have sellers. So good land right now, when we take it to auction, we're still running over 90% of our auctions are selling the week of the auction, not necessarily the day. That's changed, you know, it's not a high enough, it's not that high a percentage will sell that day, but after the auction, if it doesn't sell, it'll typically get sold by the end of that day, or at least by the end of that week. You know, the interested buyers and seller will get together and come up with a price and they'll move it. That's just.
So let me ask a question. Is there anybody on the panel that has a really opposite view of that? Who varies either upside or downside from his comments?
You know, I would jump in. It's, you know, when somebody asks what the farm's worth, our first question is who's your neighbor? And really that drives a lot of it right now. There's so much variability in what we're seeing sales. You'll see a no sale one day, and then you'll see a $12,000 acre sale, and it's really hard to predict right now.
But do you have a different opinion than he does about things that kind of stay where they are? And also, almost my reply, he mentioned interest rates adding to this value. And if we're at the bottom, at some point they will go up. So we don't want to debate rates, but should rates start going up, nor does that have a dampening effect?
You know, I'll talk specifically about Iowa. We track through our appraisal department virtually every transaction that happens in the state on a weekly basis. And so every week we get a report. And as we sit here this week, there's 550 farms for sale in Iowa. And that sounds like a big number. But then we break them out, which ones are 85% tillable or more. And there's only 150 farms that are 85% tillable or more. So you start thinking 99 counties, 1.5 farms for sale, and we're keeping track of the auction results. And we've got a lot of clients that have capital raised, wanting to place that capital. And the irony of it is the market's actually pretty strong right now.
So Eric, you're writing checks these days for farms. What's your point of view?
Prices are coming down, they just are, in general. But it's regional. It's very different by different regions. You know, it depends a lot on in an area. Is most of the ground rented or owned? What are the predominant crops? So in the Pacific Northwest, that market has been super tight and increasing in value. And that's driven a lot by what's going on in California with drought and people looking to move their California acres places like Washington and Oregon. So that's been sort of a very strong spot in the market. But everywhere else where we are, and we're predominantly across the upper Midwest and down in the Delta, everything's down, but everything has stopped trading. So everyone is holding their breath. And what we've seen, we work with probably 40 or so different farm tenants across all of our properties, and we try to structure flexible leases to help ride through some of these tough periods. But we may be the minority of acres that a farmer farms, and we've seen a couple of our tenants that have just blown up, and you won't know it because they won't tell anyone until they blow up. And when they blow up, that farm needs to move, and so you've got total constipation in the market right now. No one, everyone's hoping it's going to get better. And we don't see how that happens. We're at historically low interest rates, and we're staring down the barrel of massive infrastructure investment that's going to drive interest rates up. That's going to bring land prices down. The only thing that we have that may mitigate that is if inflation comes, then we'll see some higher crop prices perhaps, and that'll counterbalance it somewhat. So as I was saying earlier, most of what we do is deals where the farmer's looking to retire, or maybe he's passed on and the family wants to sell the estate-sold farm. What we're seeing is a substantial uptick in activity around those transitions, because if you think you're going to exit sometime over the next few years, there's probably more downside than there is upside. And so we're seeing people who are needing to get out now is probably the time. If you've got patience, then for sure, hang on. I mean, the one thing that we listening to the talks today and for doom and gloom, what we haven't, anyone's pointed out, is that the spread between the top quartile farmers and the bottom quartile farmers is like 60% of cash flow, right? So there are people who can be profitable in this environment, and those are the ones who should be buying land and should be expanding. Actually, some of the deals that we've been doing have been farmers who own a fair amount of land selling a chunk in order to raise cash for their operating business, because there's never been for a strong farmer, there's never been a better time to go out and rent land. So the way this all ripples through the market and prices is everyone who's farming here knows that rents are weaker, and they're going to become weaker. They've been sort of, people have been holding the line because you're worried about competition, but that's going away, right? The guy down the street's not going to step up and pay the rent that you're paying. You just can't afford it. So when you walk away from a lease, you try to renegotiate that land price, the lease price comes down. And now when we sit across the table from a landowner, you look at, well, what is the value of your farm? Your value of the farm is sort of the stream of income that will come out that farm in perpetuity. If you are now getting 20% less per year in rent on that farm, how can you tell me that your farm is worth what it was yesterday? So that is the mechanism by which this sort of ripples through the market. So I think at the moment there is more downside than upside, but if you can be patient, that's sort of we're a permanent vehicle. We can hold land for forever. We're super bullish long term, and so this is a time where we want to be building our base of land, because if you can ride through this down cycle, we believe there's all the fundamentals.
Well, the good news is this. Can you imagine if you're at the Taxi Cab Association meeting right now, discussing Uber? Or a friend of mine that sold all of his record stores years ago. Who's been in a record store lately? Think about the land, and I want to ask the panel, to me, that land has inherent economic value. You're going to go through cycles and you're going to have disruption, but by and large, technology appears to be helping the farmer. It's not doing what Uber's doing at the Taxi Cab Association. So do you guys see this land price, and I know you're saying short-term, Eric, that prices are going down, but long-term, you're bullish. Do you guys see technology affecting prices in general with the farmer becoming more sophisticated with new technologies and so forth?
I think that's the arbitrage. The market doesn't reflect that yet, but those are taking advantage of it.
Anybody else want to comment on that? Because this is part technology, part agriculture. We're bringing that together in the conversation.
Well, I think one thing we have to realize is that the interest rate leverage can kick in here at some point. I mean, right now, the farmer or the farmland investor, maybe it's a 3% rate of return. If rates go back up, let's say to a 6% rate of return, on the same amount of income, you've cut your value by 50%. So your leverage on the interest rate is much higher than the leverage is on the rents. Rents haven't dropped by 50%. It'd be very easy for interest rates over the next year and a half to go from 3% to 6%. So that's one thing that we have to be cautious about. And that's sort of what happened in the 80s a little bit. It wasn't necessarily the income went down. It's that the required rate of return went so high that the values had to come down to reflect it.
So do you do 706 returns?
Yes.
Okay. Flip it for a second. I think we've accomplished what you wanted with pricing. Is that right?
Yeah, I would agree. We can save the questions here. If anyone has any questions as we go through the panel, if you want to raise your hand, and you guys will run the mics over, anything like that. But yeah, I think we've done it.
So then, from a succession perspective, I want to ask a question. 706 is the final tax return you do after death in the state. Are you able to use right now legally some of this softness in pricing, though, to lower the value of land? Because again, if you're wanting to sell, take the capital in, you want it high. But if you're trying to long term through multi generations, you're not really as concerned about it except for lending purposes and so forth. You really are more concerned about the cash flow of the property and your lifestyle, and then trying to move that asset in a tax efficient manner. So just comment real quick. I know we've heard Trump say no estate tax, what have you, but right now, if you had a death, the 706, are you able to suppress some taxes?
You can suppress the value of the farmland some because of the fact that there is some cushion there, but I think the other panelists here that are in the tax and legal arena would agree that putting land into some type of vehicle, whether it's a limited liability company, limited liability partnership, taking advantage of some type of a trust, can certainly get that 25, 30, 35, 40% reduction in value just by simply doing that.
Well, but the IRS had a ruling this past year where they're not allowing those reductions.
There's proposed regulations, and with President-elect Trump, it's likely that those will never go into effect.
So I will go back to the attorney real quick. Sir, your advice real quick on the value of land in terms of estate. Do you have any particular strategies you're using?
Well, as an attorney, I always tell people to talk to their CPA. Something that's hit me, I raised in agriculture economics, and I sat in Mumford Hall 30 years ago learning about agricultural economics, and as I sit here and I listen, there's phrases and terms that I'm hearing that are all brand new to me. I mean, the agriculture's changed so much in the last 30 years. There's nothing I'm telling you that you don't know already. But the one thing that's real important to know is what hasn't changed in the last 30 years, and actually is getting maybe a little worse though, is what happens on the way to the funeral home to make arrangements. You know, I sit and I talk to people about making their plan for estate planning. So everyone that's got land here, this is something you all really need to be concerned about. You can have great, you can have great people working on your farming operations and working with people and selling your land. If you don't have a good plan, you got a big problem. Whether I'm talking to DAR, whether I'm talking to FCS financial clients, or just the individual sitting at their kitchen table, first question I ask people is, are you married? And so I ask everybody, who here is married? Okay. Now, who here is happy? I saw a couple of you get nudged. Look, you know, the dynamics of what happens when someone passes, and this whole, what was the acronym you used earlier?
VUCA?
VUCA.
VUCA, can we all say that?
Yeah, I think that tells a lot about what's happening. Everything is, people don't get along as much as they used to, and families get broken up as soon as we start talking about splitting up the family farms. And you really, if you want to succession planning, keep that century farm in the family, you need to be talking to one of these guys and making certain that you're doing that. But if you want to cause chaos in your family, don't have a plan. It's beautiful.
I want to comment on that as well. So, because there's this, did you guys know that 80% of statistics were made up? You know that? I just made that up. So, but there is some large number, and I think it's like 60%. But I'm going to give you a tip, and this will hold your estate planning attorney honest. Would you like to do that? Hold them honest. Write this down. Go to your attorney and your CPA and just write these 3 things down. What percentage of my estate is going to go to my family? What percentage is going to go to the government? And what percentage is going to a charity? Those are the 3 potential beneficiaries. So rather than try to go through all this jargon and all this language, just simply ask that question. So if you have charitable intent, you're going to want to know what you can do there. But you're probably going to want to minimize the taxes and maximize it for a family. So that's a very good policy statement. It's very easy to understand. And then that puts in play all their professions on fixing the problem, which is a very easy way to approach it. Would you agree or disagree with that?
Most people get scared about the tax issues on their farm. Of course, as we know, unless you have, as a married couple, $10.9 million, you don't have an estate tax issue. I suspect there are probably a higher number of people in this room today that have an estate tax issue than most of the folks that I deal with on a daily basis in the state of Missouri. And no matter what state you come from, you're going to have issues. You may even have estate tax issues within your own state tax system that you need to deal with. But if you do nothing at all, the real risk is that you're going to lose your farm, you're going to lose everything you've worked for to who? To the lawyers. Okay? So it's real important that you have a plan. The biggest risk is no plan. You're going to lose it not to taxes. You're going to lose it to lawyers that see a big pool of money and they're going to go in and they're going to fight.
You're going to also get to know the name of your probate judge. How many of you know the names of your probate judges? Sit in probate court just one day and see a judge with their favorite lawyer friend tell that family what's about to happen. So one little quick tip, a will is...
That's a little cynical about my profession.
Well, that's what happened. Listen, that's what happened.
And I was a probate judge, so it's double thing.
Well, I said this would be fun. Okay? We got to mix it up a little bit. But clearly, you're a probate judge, so there's let me do it. There's some specific questions you had about deferred payments and so forth, but I'm looking at the questions in the slides. We're kind of going through most of them in a different order. Is
I
that
mean,
cool?
yeah, but I think, we probably do need to touch, I mean, what do you have on deferred payments? I mean, I think we got to touch, I mean, everywhere we go, FCS is asking me, the bankers are asking, Illinois, where's the farmer sit with this deferred payment problem, and is it something that's paralyzing some of these farmers right now?
Well, I think, I think Paul's right on with estate taxes. There's better strategies out there than trying to take a position on a 706 at the last minute about how to reduce value. So there's better strategies under plans, as we talked about. Yeah, deferring payments is still one of the great things that farmers can do to reduce their taxes on an annual basis. That's a great strategy. It's a strategy most people in this world don't have. I mean, you guys, the last thing you should want is tax simplification. It will not help anybody in this room. The more loopholes and the more statutes they draft, the more smart people like us can help you eliminate estate and income taxes. So the problem's always been is what's my exit strategy though? I mean, I can defer for forever. It gets painful when we have to do something, but there's no exit strategy. So we've spent the last decade, our firm, really coming up with an exit strategy for farmers associated with that, and I think we're pretty proud of it. And so I think it exists. So yes, deferring payments, being on the cash method of accounting, and being able to prepay not only for your inputs, but to be able to prepay yourself rent. I mean, those are strategies every farmer should be using.
I think, Paul, are you seeing? There we go. That might be better. Can we hear me? Paul, are you seeing issues of brewing out there where guys are getting in some really big jams for
Yes,
deferring?
the key thing I always, when I do a lot of seminars, I tell the farmers out there that if you pay tax on your working capital, it's your working capital. If you don't pay tax on it, it's one of two sources owns that working capital. It's either the government, because you haven't paid taxes on it yet, or it's the bank. And you see too many problems with marketing and so on. So the one thing we try to make sure that our farmers understand is what is that number? If they're a $1 million operation and their potential deferred tax liability is $100,000, probably not a big deal. A couple of years ago, I looked at it wasn't a client of mine, but I looked at a balance sheet that had $40 million of assets, 0 tax bases, $8 million of net worth without a deferred tax liability. They were $4 million upside down. I mean, you can kick that can down the road, and eventually that can bite you back, and that's starting to happen now, especially where banks are saying, farmer, you need to go ahead and sell that excess piece of equipment, which has been written down to 0, which creates a tax liability, which then the equipment's not paid for. So then the farmer's got to go back to the bank and say, I need that extra $100,000 to pay the tax because I actually did this in the good times. Another strategy that we're doing right now with our farmers, especially if they work with the lenders, is farm losses can be carried back 5 years. A lot of our farmers had a lot of good sized net income in 2011 or 2012, and if we create a tax loss, as Kevin says, we're allowed to create a tax loss very easily. We can carry that back 5 years, 4 years, and get a lot of that working capital back from Uncle Sam and put it back into our farm operations. So, that's a strategy I would certainly, for those farmers at least that paid some taxes back then.
So we had that covers deferred payments, selling the farm. Do we have any questions coming from the audience? Yes, sir.
In our area, we have a lot of C corps that were set up in the early 70s. Single
Yeah.
families are in front of.
We're going to give you the mic.
We have a lot of C corps that were set up in the early 70s, and now families are confronted with how to unwind these, especially where there's, in the second or third generation, there's nobody else on the farm, they want to get out. How do they do that? And can you do that?
Yes, you can do it. It requires one bad thing, not for the heirs, but it requires one bad thing for the owner. The key is, as long as it's farmland, you have to elect to be taxed as an S corporation. You need to own that or keep that land for at least 5 years. And if you want to escape the tax, what do we require? What does tax laws require in order to eliminate taxes? You have to die. So if you own 100% of that corporation, when you pass away, your heirs can go ahead and sell that land or liquidate that corporation and likely pay little or no income tax or capital gains taxes on it. But it does require you to own that land or that corporation when you pass away.
Are you recommending any community property trust for people that are living in states where they can't?
I'm in a community property state, so I don't deal with it that much. I'd probably turn that one over to Kevin.
Yeah, and Kevin, when you answer the question, maybe describe a little bit of what we're talking about, see how many people could be positively affected by it.
Just to disagree with Paul a little bit to make this interesting, is that let's wait and see what. So President-elect Trump certainly wants to bring down the tax rates on C corp. So staying in a C corp, we'll see if it's a bad situation to be in going forward. That is his experience. He had a lot of C corps. He'd like to see C corps taxed at a much lower rate. Obviously, it could be internationally. S corps are still the right answer, but in a year, being in a C corp environment may make more sense. Also, if the family's willing to take a little bit of risk, there's some abilities to spin off C corps. Accountants and attorneys have been doing that for years. Doing some spin-offs, you have to have 2 active businesses. You get pretty creative and create some active businesses in some C corps where you can spin things off and maybe get some assets out a little quicker associated with that. So I want to answer that. I'm not disagreeing with Paul, but
Well, actually, you're bringing up a great point. Let's just see how the panelists feel about this. I mean, there is a pause button right now that we're kind of setting on a lot of things. And it appears that taxes might be going down, right? Is that what
Yeah,
everybody-
Kevin brought up a good point, is that C corps right now, both Congress and the President-elect probably agree it's going to be 15%. That's a pretty low rate. But on the world stage, that's not a low rate, that's the common rate. The battle is going to be, what is the flow-through rate going to be? If you're farming as a partnership, you're farming as an S corp, if that rate is 40% and C corps are 15%, what are you farmers going to do? You're going to convert to a C corp. So they know that. There's a lot of discussion that they're trying to get that flow-through rate to be down to the same rate as a C corp. So there is no, you really don't care whether you're a C corp or an S corp. We don't know what that answer is going to be. Hopefully we'll know by this summer. When you have major tax acts like this, they typically happen in the summertime. But you already have, it's a good thing, or as Kevin says, it might be a bad thing, because maybe we don't want tax reform, but it's a good thing. If you want tax reform, Paul Ryan is really pushing for this, and Trump's pushing for it, so we'll know fairly quickly, I think.
I hate the pause button, and because life doesn't work that way. You got to still make decisions daily. Everybody in this room has to make decisions. We're all looking for an excuse not to have to make decisions. You can't live your life that way. You can't run a business that way, so you have to make decisions. So even if the C corp rates come down, which they will, I mean, that's what they want to do. In our country, flow-through rates will always be less. So if they bring down the C corp rates, still you have to dividend out the cash to get it out to you. So you're still in a double tax environment. Flow-through rates will have to come down also, and they're always cheaper than C corp rates. Now, we do have to see how this is all going to unwind, but in general, it's always better to be in a flow-through entity. We don't want to go back to a country where we have a bunch of C corps running around trying to get a lot of liability protection. So that's not where we're headed. But I do think we have to see some of this through. But don't wait to make tax decisions. You need to be, working with smart people today. And most of us do know what's going to happen. And Mr. Trump is not going to get everything he wants, and we know that.
Well, some of these decisions are strategic, and they could be out 300, 400 years if you're doing proper dynasty planning.
Absolutely.
I would hit the pause button on doing that right now, just on the strategic side, not the operational day-to-day, but some of the new laws for asset protection and all. I mean, there could be some positive change if you elect now. I'm just taking the other side of it because I think time is a big factor in how you frame out decisions. And the longer you stretch out some of these decisions, the more the short-term consequences can have an effect. It's like leverage.
And certainly on those dynasty issues, I think almost to some degree the tax question is the last question you should be asking. It's really, doesn't make sense. My mother was the oldest of 12. The third generation has now got 215 relatives. That's just in the third generation. If we owned a 5,000-acre farm with 215 relatives, does that really make sense? And we haven't even been around, barely 100 years. You have to look at not just the tax. So when we're doing planning, anytime we're getting together with a client to discuss estate planning, succession planning, generally the tax is going to be the third or fourth thing that we bring up. Really, what's most important for this family? Where do you want your assets? What do you want to achieve? And then based on those objectives, we can come up with a way to reduce the estate tax.
Yeah, it shouldn't even be called estate tax anymore. You guys should be doing succession and asset protection planning. It shouldn't be, or the tax implications should never, you need to remove the government from your succession plans. Good business people, just remove that aspect. Congress is going to change your mind several more times over the next, most people in this room are going to see a Democratic House, Senate, and White House again. And guess what? We're going to have really bad estate tax situations then. So you need to remove the government from your succession plan and do really good asset protection and succession planning now. Because this happened under Bush 43, as he kept talking about repealing the estate tax. And quite honestly, they had the votes to do it, and they still were only able to do it for 10 years because of the sunset provisions that are built into our budget system. So anytime the estate tax come back, it's 101 years old, it's been repealed twice, each time for 1 year each. Most of you are going to die in a year of estate tax. You're not that good at planners to die in a year of estate tax.
Hey, Kevin, I had to pick on Pat early to get the spirit of the debate going. So now that we're going, you're passionate about, both of you guys are, but you've been kind of quiet, so you got to be wanting to say something here that you're passionate about.
Yeah, sure. It's interesting as I sit and listen to kind of the discussion going on up here, because I'm not really in the land buying business or even the succession planning business. But one thing that I'm hearing as I hear a lot of these fellows talk is this reality, and that reality is the landowner's changing. And I think the thing that's going to be interesting as we move forward. As a farmer, used to, in order to grow your farm, you build relationships in the community, and you got to know people through community events and church and basketball games and things like that. But the reality is in some communities, up to 50% of the landowners don't even live in the area anymore. And so as a grower, that really challenges you in order to be able to go out and try to build those relationships and grow your farm. And I think the other reality is public opinion is changing these landowners' views on how their land should be farmed, just like it is the consumer, and really is being driven by the consumer. So how do you position yourself as a grower in order to be able to work with those individuals who want to farm one way or the other?
Well, when you think of the farm and you have 125 relatives, I've been in the wealth management world for 30 years. Wealth managers love to see you sell the farm because then they get the money to make their 1 or 2% on it, which is the industry I'm in. I beat myself up now, Pat. But just think of managing money like a bar of soap. The more hands touch it, the smaller it gets. It's just a fact. So if we can keep some of these assets, that are hard assets that have an economic base, and over time through technology it's going to transform the farm, I think there's an argument to be made for kind of keeping a hard asset. So do you even have a strong opinion about that on the other side?
I was just wondering if I could poll the audience, we've been pulled up here. How many people in here would like to see the estate tax go away? Just raise your hand if you'd love to see the estate tax go away. Okay, I'm going to add one more comment to it. How many people want to see the estate tax go away, but then there's no step up in basis? That's possibly or likely what's coming.
Well, I think it's one worse. If you look at his proposal, it's repeal the estate tax, but bring in a capital gains tax at death.
Yes.
So you're not eliminating estate tax. What you're doing is just halving the estate. So the estate tax is 40%, capital gains rates are 20%. So instead of having a 40% tax, when you die, it would be 20%. So it's a lower rate. But he's certainly not advocating repealing the estate tax, which he doesn't have the votes for anyway. And there's no guarantee that there would be any exclusion from those capital gains rates. It could start on the first dollar. So he's being a little bit less than forthward when he's talking about repealing estate tax. It's not true repeal.
Well, do you think at some point the cows come home? Because Trump's one thing, but we have a debt that's massive. And we have zero interest rates on the debt. And at some point, as the markets adjust, we're going to have an issue with payment of this debt, and it's going to force something else. So who believes from an attribution perspective that in the foreseeable future we'll see the debt raise its ugly head and start having an effect?
Hey, Jim, I guess you would have the insight, would you not, on the, Jim, would you have the stage on this one?
Well, maybe to a degree. I think what you're referring to is I serve on the Federal Reserve Board here in Kansas City on the KC board. But yes, it will have an impact, I think. There's no question it will. But I don't know that I can give a good answer to that specific question. So interest rates are going to go up. There's definitely, I can't predict when they're going to go up. I don't have that insight. But logic tells you they're going to go up. That there is sentiment within the FOMC at a greater percentage now to look at normalizing rates. And that's really what they're trying to do. They're just trying to look at normalizing rates. When you look at it from a,
So let me back up. So you don't see the Fed digging into corporate bonds or equities to extend their other policy? You see it kind of going the other way now? That's been the rumor.
yeah, you mean buy more corporate bonds? I hate to say never, but at the moment it does not appear that that would be the direction that they would go. And again, my insight is the same as a whole lot of other kinds of conversations I've been in. But the direction that interest rates are going to go will definitely be up, and that will have a headwind on farmland. I think to Paul's point, he mentioned it earlier, if you see, I've said for a long time, if you got long-term CD rates, if I could get a 4% 12-month CD, and I just inherited a farm that's worth $1 million, and, I got 6 other heirs or 8 other heirs, I'm going to be much more motivated to sell that farm than when I can get a 12-month CD at 0.3%. That's been the impact that it's had on that part of the land market. That's why landowners are holding land longer. They don't have a good home for it. So I mean that's
Reinvestment risk
on that end as well.
So you're basically saying the reinvestment risk is also an all-time high given where the markets are?
Yeah, I think so.
Well,
I think I'm agreeing with you. I'm trying to.
No, I'm just bringing it out because to have you. By the way, if this was a technology conference right now, with the quality of the panel that's here, every one of you have your phones out recording. You ever seen Jobs or Gates when they're at a conference of tech guys, right? Everybody's recording. So I do want to compliment the quality of this panel, and even just the fact that we can hear from you directly some of these comments. It's a big deal, Kevin. So I take my hat off to you. It's a great work.
The other thing we have to realize, we can quantify what interest rates would do to the debt because it's almost 20 trillion right now. That's the posted debt. So 1% raise is 200 billion a year. I mean, year after year, just 1%. If they go back to what we almost call a norm, you're looking at an extra 800 billion. So that's the number we're talking about.
It's definitely going to have an impact.
So Kevin, let's take a look at the list here.
Yeah, is there a positive one we can talk about?
Let me just say this. I believe owning a farm and being in this industry, you're actually in a much better spot than most. The rate of destruction that's occurring in most industries is mind-boggling. If you take a look at what Eric does with Fall Line, he takes 10% of his capital and he professionally invests in early-stage ag technologies. He takes the other 90 and he goes into land and he enhances the land. You guys can do the same thing with Carter Williams, who's a professional investor that's ferreting through all these things and diversify your assets gradually in little, small, tiny bets of early-stage companies while you're also making those investments in your land. And you actually are better risk takers than most people because you're used to planting 100 trees and 20 of them dying, then you go replant. You just don't think about the 20 that die. Most investors can't stand to see a company go under, right, Andy? We laugh about it, but they can't do it. So you're great risk takers, and you have an asset that's got an inherent value to it. And you're in an area where technology is actually helping. So I'd embrace some of those things, and the rest of this stuff is you just got to have great tax people, great lawyers, and people around you. But you're not facing the headwind a lot of industries are.
I think I got one question. I know some of the guys in the room that are still interested in buying ground at this time. Are you seeing any bargains out there? We're seeing bargains on dry land, anything in the river bottoms, APC ground. What are guys buying right now? They're looking to buy.
Then again, Steve will have probably a little different answer than I will because we operate in some of the same areas and some different areas. But when you look at where the investment funds are buying right now to try to get the best ROIs, they're focusing a lot on the Delta. They're focusing a lot in the Northwest. They're focusing to a lesser degree in Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. Up in southern Michigan, those are hot areas for the investment funds, like the John Hancock's. I'm not sure where you invest specifically, but I mean those are areas where some of the funds that we're familiar with work with are investing. Now, I wouldn't say those are bargain prices. That's not my point. They've got a return on investment percentage they're looking for, and those are the areas where they're going to get it in those areas. There are some areas where you can buy some properties. Some of the dry land stuff, has started to deteriorate in price to a point where it might start looking like a bit more of a bargain than it had. It's just an interesting market. I know the last 9 auctions we had in Nebraska, I talked to our sales manager yesterday in Nebraska, 7 of them were bought by investors. And he was really surprised at that. Because primarily it's been farmers buying land, and investors typically have been coming into the market and buying at the high. Investors, when the high is set in the market, it's not usually an investor setting the high. It's usually the neighbors. I think Steve mentioned that. Who's your neighbor? And it's the neighbors. That's how the highs get set. It's not usually the investors. So I don't have a really great answer. We've seen real deterioration in the Red River Valley, and I don't know whether that'll come back with gangbusters, but it's an area right now that I think looks like it could be some bargain prices there, and that has a lot to do with sugar beets and some of the impacts of actually GMOs are having a bit of an impact on the sugar beet market and amongst some other factors. So there are some areas where there's some good prices, and there are some areas where the funds are very active right now. So, Steve?
Yeah, if there's deals out there, I would love to see them. I haven't seen them. We had 116 auctions in Iowa in November, and we've got investors that have given us an allocation of capital, and so we go to all these auctions, and we're sending somebody there to bid with cash to buy. And we bought one property this fall and winter. So I'm not seeing the decline in prices that they're seeing, at least in the Midwest. As rents have came down also with cap rates, so if you take $300 rent and go to $250 rent, you take your 3.5 cap rate to 3, you end up with the same price. And so that's what I'm seeing right now. I'm not seeing the decline that everybody's hoping for if you're an investor.
Eric?
Tracy. So every operator probably knows this. In your neighborhood, land tends to trade in a relatively tight band. But the quality of that land is all over the map. And only the folks that really understand how productive that ground is sort of see the value there. And
Hey, Eric, can everyone hear Eric? Okay, yes.
sorry.
Yeah, because I think what he's saying is really important. I know where you're going with this. I want to make sure everyone can hear.
So I was saying that land tends to trade in a relatively tight band, but the quality of that land has much higher volatility than that. And when you're looking at, what's the CSR on this piece of ground, everyone who operates knows that has potentially nothing to do with the quality of that ground, because it has everything to do with, a generation ago there was a soil survey taken, and this is what that dirt is, but how it's been treated over the last 30 years determines how productive it's going to be from now and going forward. So in the market that we were in 5 years ago, we're fighting just to get anything bought because it was such a difficult market to buy ground. We were competing with all the local farmers for everything that we were looking at. And so you ended up just kind of having to get in that price range, and then you were sort of hoping that you were getting the high quality ground. But as we've gotten more established in our markets, we know what the high quality ground is that we're looking for, and that's what the bargain is today. Is that now we can identify ground that has this quality, but is trading in this range and at the lower end of that range, and that's what we're trying to.
But Eric, I think what you guys have done also, though, is you've changed the equation for buying land.
Yeah.
And it's publicly, so I'm not going to give away trade secrets, but he's really looking at a piece of property like a commercial real estate, not for the rents today, but he's looking at if I fix it up and do this and convert it to condos, what does it do? We really haven't talked about that, but would you see the other professional investors doing? If you're bringing in new technology, you're changing.
Yeah, just to clarify, we're not actually converting things to condos.
An analogy.
Yeah, but that I think that's also the reason why we're probably deploying capital 2 to 3 times more quickly today than we were 2 years ago, because our competitors, both the local farmers and the traditional ag institutions, were very comfortable buying ground when it was 5 cap ground. You buy a piece of ground and you can rent it out and get a 5% cash yield. I mean, geez, let's do that all day long. Well, that doesn't exist in the current marketplace. So where are deals getting done in terms of where our rents are right at this moment? Yeah, they're in the 3s. We see, in the quarterly Corn Belt, there's still things going in the 2s. In the Pacific Northwest, they're going in the 2s, sometimes in the 1s. It's crazy what's going on there. However, what we find is there are still arbitrages where if you squint a little bit and you look at what the ground can do if it were managed differently, if you made some improvements to it, then we don't buy necessarily on the basis of what's the market rent we're getting today. It's what can we earn on this property once we've made the improvements. I mean, we're willing to roll up our sleeves and do some of the hard work, and I think that's where the opportunity is today.
Well, that's what leads me to the question, and I had the conversation a few years back. I said, I thought dry land ground was undervalued maybe 4 to 5 years ago, and we were buying, and I think we've seen that. And the reason I say that, when I meet with the Gateses and the Buffetts, and where are they putting their money to work? I mean, they're not putting their money to work to grow a better crop in Iowa and Illinois. They're putting their money to work to grow more production on ground like this table in third world countries. The money that's being put into technology is to go onto ground that's BC ground, that like you said, with a vision further out. So should we be looking, if you see things that may come on that are in the river bottoms? I know Gates Group looking for water rights along river bottoms. You got other groups that are looking for dry ground because they believe technology is going to advance to where that ground exponentially produces more than that ground they could have bought in Iowa or Illinois as a ratio is on.
Yeah, I'll give you a perfect example. So we have some ground in northern Wisconsin where T yield for corn is 108 bushels. We buy that ground for about a third the cost of what you buy ground corn in Iowa. And so even there's an arbitrage right out of the gate, right? 108 bushels versus maybe 180 is T yield in Kim kind of Iowa, where you can buy ground for somewhere between 10 and 12,000 an acre. So we're buying at a third of the price, but we're getting half the productivity. So right there, the value per bushel, you're kind of ahead. But if you change a little bit of the way that you farm up there, we've got some interesting technologies that we can apply. We can do some just straight up the middle stuff like installing drainage tile, get out in the fields a couple weeks earlier. We're averaging 160 on that ground, and where we apply the full load of technology, we're getting over 200. Now, some of that's not profitable today, and that's the other thing that we see people in general when they're managing ground. The sort of the legacy practice is just to use the same recipe over and over again. But you've got to be able to respond to prices, and so that is important today in the downturn. To how do I skinny my budget but still try to maximize yield, subject to double our budget to maximize cash flow? But then when corn goes to 6, 7, 8, again it will, at some point it will, what are you going to do differently at that point to really capitalize on that? And that's where we spend a lot of time in R&D, is on what are the levers that we can pull so that when we get into $5, $6, $7 corn, we can get $2.50 on ground that does it's a 108 bushel T yield ground. That's what technology is going to do, and that's what sort of having a capital partner in your operation allows you to. We can throw money at that because we're thinking over a 20, 30-year period that you can't necessarily do in your budget right at this moment, but it's sort of the research that we're doing now is what's going to pay dividends when we come out of this.
So how awesome is it to hear a venture capitalist from San Francisco talk farming? I mean, I think the future is here now. I mean, when you think about
We need to bring Clay up for the farm talk, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Well, when you think about Carter Williams talking about the renaissance of ag and the Mid-Atlantic, or excuse me, Midwest and so forth, and then you're here off the West Coast, sometimes you got to stop and pause and think. We really are seeing this kind of second wave of revolution.
Well, and I would comment, I'm old enough, I graduated college in '76, so I mean, I was around all through the 80s. And over the years, over the last 6 or 7 years, years, I've been asked to comment a lot at various places that I've spoken about, is there a comparison, what's different? And one thing that is really starkly different right now is just exactly what you brought up. If you go back to 1982 and 1983 and 1984, which were extremely bad years, 83 and 84 especially, 2 probably wasn't as bad, but money couldn't get out of agriculture fast enough. There was nobody trying to shoehorn money into agriculture. You couldn't borrow money. There wasn't money coming in. I mean, Deere was nearly broke. International was going under. It was just different. Today, there is money on the outside from the tech side, from the funds coming in, trying to get into ag. I think Farm Journal or Successful Farming, I think it was reported here a while back, it was roughly $25 billion that they knew of that was trying to get into the ag tech sector right now that has been designated to that. We just had a long-range planning meeting in my company where we spent a good deal of time talking about just that aspect of how that disrupts traditional agriculture. And disruption is not necessarily bad, but certainly it's disrupting. That is a much, much different scenario. And I think that's partially why we're not seeing the deterioration of land price that we would expect with the deterioration we've seen in gross income, is because of all of that outside capital. I think that's having an impact on it.
Well, it had a negative impact on the record stores or the taxi cab world, but it's having a stabilization effect, I think is what you're saying, right?
I think so. I mean, time will tell. But I mean, if I had to make a snap analysis today, that would be my analysis. And I think so.
I see some other heads working.
Yeah, and I think the key thing, the key difference, I think, not the only difference, but the key difference between now and the 1980s, 81, 82, 83, we have 3 and 4% interest rates right now. Back then, we had 15 and 18% interest rates. If we had 15 and 18% interest rates right now, none of that money would be wanting to go into farming.
Exactly.
So that's, to me, that's 80% or more. The key difference between the 80s and right now is the interest rates.
Hey, Dave, I have one other question. You got written in a bunch. Are you seeing anything unique or different as far as leases are concerned? Could guys structure things any differently? Flex leases, standard lease, standard rent agreements. What's going out there? How can guys get a little creative in this type of time?
Yeah, I think, back when corn was good, everybody went to, a regular cash rent. There's been a lot of talk, and as I talk to a lot of guys, they're trying to get landowners to move back to a crop share, or even if they can't get as far as a crop share, maybe like a flexible cash lease or something like that, where the landowner does take on a little bit of risk, even though there is still some security in that cash rent as well.
One thing I would chime in on this ties into the ag tech thing. We started using some of these ag tech companies in our management business, and we're running these profitability maps to see what our managed acres look like. And what we're seeing is that 3 to 15% of every farm field that we manage is being farmed unprofitably. And so having an open conversation with your landowner and your farm tenant and figuring out if you can fix those acres, if they should be into a CRP program, if you should use some sort of prescription planting and fertility program on those farms. There is a lot of arbitrage out there left. And so instead of renegotiating leases, we're trying to get smarter on how we look at farming some of those farms and make it a more productive conversation instead of just slashing rents. We're also doing some things, some of the various states have getting farmer tax credits, so maybe you shift the lease from dad to son and the landowner can get a tax credit. You can lower rent, but the impact of the landowner is neutral because of that tax credit. So we're doing some things like that to help soften the impact of lower rents to the landowners.
Yeah,
Probably want to wrap it up.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up by saying, I hope everyone has a safe trip home and a happy holiday season. And thanks to the panel, great discussion. And Pat, I had to get it stoked up, so I think we got everybody. And any other questions?
No, I think that's great. They'll be around for some questions. Let's take a quick 10-minute break. Come back, we'll hear Randy.